The rain in this valley doesn't just fall, it possesses. It is a relentless gray weight that turns the golden oaks into skeletal sentinels and traps the living inside tombs of mahogany and glass. My father called this house a sanctuary. To me, it was a frame, a massive, cold, gilded frame where I was the only subject, painted in shades of isolation. I am Olivia. I am the silence that lives in the corners of the ceiling. I am the ink that stains the floorboards. I was perfectly content being a ghost in my own life until the front door swung open and let the storm inside. But the storm didn't bring thunder. It brought Mira. She didn't walk into the foyer. She invaded it. I watched her from the top of the stairs, hidden in the velvet shadows of the landing. She was a riot of color in a world of gray. A bright, offensive yellow hoodie, skin the color of honey and toasted sugar, and a crown of messy, wheat blonde hair that looked like it had been styled by a gale. She was laughing. Why was she laughing? The air in this house is too heavy for laughter. It's meant for the scratching of graphite and the ticking of clocks. My father's new wife was a blur of perfume and apologies, but I didn't look at her. I looked at the girl, Mira. She had a tennis racket strapped to her bag, and a gaze that didn't just see the room. It claimed it. When she finally looked up, her olive green eyes caught mine through the banisters. For a heartbeat, the house felt small. The distance between the dust on my fingers and the heat of her energy felt like a physical canyon. She didn't look away. She didn't offer a shy smile. She simply tilted her head, her golden green eyes sparking with a terrifying curiosity. "So," she said, her voice echoing off the marble, "you must be the ghost of the attic." I didn't answer. I retreated. I pulled my slate gray cardigan tight around my shoulders, feeling the weight of my floor-length hair trailing behind me like a heavy, ink-black shroud. I went to the only place she couldn't reach, the forbidden floor, the studio. The days that followed were a war of frequencies. I stayed in my sanctuary under the eaves, surrounded by the smell of turpentine and linseed oil. I painted the rain. I painted the way the light died at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was the cold peak of a mountain, stable and unmoving. But downstairs, Mira was a tectonic shift. I could hear her. I could feel her. The rhythmic thwack-thwack of a tennis ball against the garage door. The sudden, jarring bursts of pop music from her speakers. The way she bounded up the stairs, 3 steps at a time, making the ancient wood groan in protest. She was everything I had spent 23 years avoiding. She was movement. She was life. I tried to maintain the perimeter. I timed my descents to the kitchen for when she was at practice. I survived on black coffee and the hushed whispers of my own thoughts. But the rain had other plans. It grew thicker, more violent. It washed away the roads and rattled the windows until the glass hummed. And then, the ultimate betrayal occurred. The hum died. The lights flickered, gasped, and vanished. The house was plunged into a darkness so absolute it felt liquid. I stood in the center of my studio, a charcoal pencil frozen in my hand. The silence was no longer my friend. It was a vacuum. I needed light, and I knew the only place the emergency candles were kept was the great hall. I descended the stairs, my bare feet silent on the cold wood. My long hair felt like a weight, dragging against the steps. When I reached the ground floor, I saw a flickering glow coming from the living room. It wasn't a candle. It was the hearth. Mira was there. She was kneeling on the rug, her honey-tanned skin painted in the deep oranges and reds of the fire. She looked different in the shadows. The sun-drenched athlete had been replaced by something softer, something more vulnerable. She was struggling with something on the floor, a heavy, dark object. As I stepped into the light, she looked up. The golden sparks in her eyes were reflected in the embers of the fireplace. She wasn't wearing her sneakers. She was barefoot, her toes curled into the rug. "The power's out," she whispered. Her voice was stripped of its usual bravado. "Even the tennis courts are underwater. I thought I'd lose my mind if it stayed this quiet." I looked down at what she was holding. It was a vintage record player, a heavy wooden relic of my grandfather's. Next to her was a stack of vinyl, thick and black and smelling of history. She was trying to place the needle, but her hands meant for power and speed, were trembling slightly. She was afraid of the dark. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The girl who brought the sun into the house was terrified of the shadows I called home. "You're doing it wrong," I said. My voice was raspy from days of disuse. I sat down on the rug, several feet away, but the heat from her body was already reaching out to me. I reached for the arm of the record player. My pale, paint-stained fingers brushed against her warm, freckled knuckles. It was only a second of contact, a mere graze of skin, but it felt like an electric arc. My bone-white skin against her honey tan, the cold versus the heat. The needle dropped. The first notes of a dusty 1950s jazz record began to spin into the room. A saxophone, low and mournful, began to weave through the sound of the rain hitting the roof. We sat there, two strangers connected by a spinning disc of plastic and the dying light of a fire. The silence wasn't gone. It had just changed shape. It was no longer a void. It was a bridge. "I've never heard anything like that," Mira murmured, her olive eyes fixed on the record. "It sounds like a person crying, but they're happy about it." "It's blue," I said, looking at the fire. "That music is the color of the sky just before it turns to night." She looked at me then, not at the record, not at the fire, at me. I felt the weight of her gaze, the way it searched my face, lingering on the violet of my eyes and the ink on my skin. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide back in my attic where nothing could touch me, but I didn't. For the first time in my life, I stayed. The jazz record spiraled to its end, the scratchy hiss of the needle in the groove, acting as a heartbeat for the dying fire. We remained there, two statues carved from opposing elements. Mira's presence was a physical pressure, a radiant warmth that seemed to pull at the very edges of my cold porcelain skin. I could see the fine blonde hairs on her arms, standing up in the chill, and the way the orange light caught the dense constellation of freckles on her shoulders. She was a map of every sun she had ever chased, while I was a testament to the shadows I had sought. "Why do you hide up there?" she asked suddenly. Her voice wasn't an intrusion this time. It was a soft question, drifting through the smell of wood smoke. "I've lived here for 3 weeks, Olivia. I've heard your footsteps. I've seen the way you watch the trees, but you never come down. You're like a secret the house is trying to keep." I looked at my hands. The indigo paint under my nails looked like bruises in the firelight. "Some secrets are kept because they don't know how to exist in the light, Mira. I don't hide. I just inhabit a different frequency. Your world is all movement and scoreboards, and the sound of the wind in your ears when you run. My world is still. If I move too fast, the colors blur. If I speak too loud, the meaning shatters." Mira shifted, her vintage pink sweater rustling. She moved closer, the distance between us shrinking until I could smell the faint, clean scent of her, like rain on grass and expensive sunscreen. "Movement isn't just about speed," she countered, her olive green eyes searching mine. "Sometimes it's about rhythm, like that music. It's slow, but it's going somewhere. My world is loud, because I'm afraid that if I stop making noise, I'll disappear. You're afraid that if you make any noise, you'll be caught." She reached out, and for a moment, I thought she would touch my face. I felt my breath catch in my throat, a sharp, cold knot of anticipation. But she didn't. She pointed to my sketchbook. which I had unconsciously brought down with me. Show me. Show me what the ghost of the attic sees. I hesitated. My sketches were my skin. They were the raw, unedited version of my soul. But there was something in the way she asked. Not a demand of power, but a request for connection. I opened the heavy, cream-colored pages. The firelight hit the charcoal. I hadn't drawn landscapes. I had drawn her. There were dozens of sketches. Mira in mid-swing on the terrace. Her body a masterpiece of tension and grace. Mira laughing at a bird on the windowsill. Mira, out of focus. A blur of wheat blonde hair against the rain. It was a silent confession. I had been watching her not out of judgment, but out of a desperate artistic hunger for the life she radiated. Mira went silent. I watched her face, waiting for the rejection, the laughter, the discomfort. Instead, I saw her lower lip tremble. Her hand moved to her nose, tracing the freckles I had meticulously rendered in graphite. "You made me look significant," she whispered. "In my old life, I was just the girl who won trophies. My friends, my coaches, they saw the win. They didn't see the girl. But you saw the way my hair gets messy when I'm tired. You saw the way I look when I'm alone and think no one is watching." She looked at me, her golden green eyes wet with unshed tears. "You're not a ghost, Olivia. You're a mirror." A sudden, violent crack of thunder shook the house, and the last of the embers in the fireplace gasped and died. We were plunged into a velvet ink-black void. The rain redoubled its efforts, a rhythmic pounding that felt like it was trying to break through the roof. In the total darkness, I felt a hand find mine. It was Mira's. Her palm was hot, her grip firm and certain. I didn't pull away. I didn't freeze. I let my slender, paint-stained fingers interlock with hers. The contrast was staggering. The honey-tanned athlete's strength meeting the nocturnal artist's fragility. It was a sweet revenge against the coldness of this house. We were reclaiming the darkness, turning it from a place of fear into a sanctuary of our own making. "I'm scared of the quiet," she admitted, her voice so close I could feel the ghost of her breath against my ear. "Stay here tonight?" "Not as a ghost. As my sister. As Olivia. I'm here," I whispered back. We moved to the large emerald green velvet sofa. It was a slow, tentative choreography. We shared a single, massive wool blanket that smelled of cedar. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The jazz record had long since stopped, but the rhythm of our breathing began to synchronize. I sat with my back against the armrest, and Mira, with a soft sigh of surrender, leaned her head against my shoulder. I felt the weight of her, a solid, living, breathing reality. Her short, wheat blonde hair was soft against my neck, a sharp contrast to the floor-length black waves of my own hair that acted as a secondary blanket for us both. My heart, usually a slow and steady metronome of isolation, began to race. It was a terrifying, beautiful sensation. I reached out and tentatively placed my arm around her, my long fingers resting on her dusty rose sleeve. I felt her relax completely into me, her breathing deepening into the rhythmic cadence of sleep. I stayed awake for a long time, watching the lightning illuminate the room in brief, silver flashes. I looked at our intertwined hands under the blanket, the moonstone pale against the honey tan. We were two halves of a story that this house had tried to keep apart. I realized then that I didn't want to go back to my attic. I didn't want to be a ghost anymore. I wanted to be the ink that recorded her sun, and I wanted her sun to dry my ink. The Zapretny etage, the forbidden floor, wasn't my studio. It was the barrier I had built around my heart, and tonight, the rain had washed the walls away. As the first hint of a lavender dawn began to touch the edges of the rain-streaked windows, I finally closed my eyes. For the first time in 23 years, the silence didn't feel like a vacuum. It felt like a promise. Morning did not break. It seeped, It was a slow, watercolor wash of lavender and bruised blue that bled through the heavy, rain-streaked glass of the living room. I woke to a weight on my chest that felt more vital than breath. Mira was still there, a golden anchor in my sea of gray. Her head was tucked perfectly into the hollow of my neck, and her breathing was a warm, rhythmic pulse against my collarbone. I lay frozen, afraid that even a twitch of my long, ink-black hair would shatter this fragile architecture of peace. In the soft light, the sun-drenched athlete looked like a fallen star, without the armor of her tennis racket or the shield of her bravado. She was just a girl, made of honeyed skin and vulnerabilities. I traced the path of the freckles on her cheek with my eyes, a silent, ocular mapping of the girl who had dared to invade my silence. She stirred, a small, soft sound escaping her pale lips, and her hand, still locked in mine, tightened its grip. "Don't go back to the attic," she murmured, her voice thick with the velvet haze of sleep. She didn't open her eyes, but she shifted her weight, moving even closer until there was no air left between us. I felt the heat of her athletic frame radiating through my slate-gray cardigan. It was a sensory overload. The smell of her citrus shampoo, the scratchy texture of the wool blanket, and the terrifyingly sweet pressure of her body against mine. "The light is back, Mira," I whispered, my voice caught in the back of my throat. "The shadows are gone. You don't have to be afraid anymore." She finally opened her eyes. Those olive-green depths, now flecked with the amber of the morning sun, searched mine. She didn't pull away. Instead, she reached up with her free hand, her fingertips roughened by strings and court grips, brushing a lock of my black hair away from my face. Her touch was a spark of electricity on my moonstone-pale skin. "I'm not afraid of the shadows anymore, Olivia," she said, her gaze steady and piercing. "I'm afraid of the distance. I'm afraid that when the sun comes out, you'll decide that I'm too loud for your art again, that you'll go back to being a ghost, because it's safer than being seen." I felt a tear prick at the corner of my misty violet eyes. She had reached into the very center of my fortress and found the weak stone. I was the cold CEO of my own isolation, a ruler of a kingdom of one, and she was the revolution I never saw coming. "I can't go back," I confessed, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "The ink has already dried, Mira. You're in every sketch. You're in the way I hear the rain now. I don't know how to paint a world that doesn't have your light in it." She smiled then, a soft, private thing that wasn't meant for a crowd or a scoreboard. She sat up, taking the cold air with her, but she didn't let go of my hand. She stood and pulled me with her, leading me toward the kitchen. The house was still dark, the power yet to return, but the fear was gone. We moved through the mahogany halls like a single entity, the tall, slender, nocturnal artist and the vibrant solar athlete, creating a new silhouette in the dust. We spent the morning in a domestic trance. I watched her move around the kitchen with a grace that wasn't about power, but about care. She made tea, not the quick, functional drink I was used to, but a ritual of honey and lemon and patience. When she handed me the ceramic mug, our fingers lingered on the heat of the clay. I saw the way her golden green eyes tracked the movement of my lips as I sipped. "Paint me," she said suddenly, her voice low. "Not from a distance, not from the shadows of the landing. Paint me here, now." I led her back to the forbidden floor, my studio. The room was freezing, the large skylight rattling under the persistent drizzle. It was a graveyard of unfinished thoughts. Canvases turned to the wall, jars of dried pigment, the heavy scent of linseed oil. Mira stepped into the center of the room, her wheat blonde hair glowing like a beacon against the charcoal-stained walls. She looked out of place, a burst of summer in a winter vault. "Where do you want me?" she asked. "By the window," I directed, my artistic instincts taking over. I want the gray light to hit your skin. I want the world to see how you hold the sun, even when the sky is dying." She sat on the wooden stool, her posture relaxing into something raw and honest. I took my charcoal. I didn't look at the paper. I looked at her. I drew the curve of her neck, the strength in her shoulders, the way her freckles seemed to pulse with a life of their own. But as I worked, the charcoal felt too blunt. It couldn't capture the warmth. It couldn't capture the way my heart hammered against my ribs every time she shifted her gaze. I dropped the pencil. "I can't do it," I said, my breath hitching. Mira stood and walked toward me, her bare feet silent on the paint-spattered floorboards. She stopped just inches away, her heat a physical force. "Why?" "Because you're not a subject, Mira. You're a riot. You're a fire. You can't be trapped on a flat surface." She reached out, her hand cupping my jaw, her thumb tracing the line of my lower lip. The contact was so intense I felt my knees weaken. The cold professor of my own mind was failing, the logic of my isolation collapsing under the sheer weight of her presence. "Then stop trying to trap me," she whispered. "Just experience me." She leaned in, and for a heartbeat, the world was nothing but the scent of citrus and the sound of the rain. Her lips didn't touch mine. Not yet. She pressed her forehead against mine, our breaths mingling in the cold air of the studio. It was a soft romance, a slow burning fuse. We stood there, the ink-black hair of the ghost and the wheat-blonde hair of the sun, weaving together in the gray light. I realized then that the sweet revenge wasn't against the house or our parents. It was against the idea that we had to be alone. I reached up, my long, pale fingers tangling in the messy strands of her hair. Pulling her closer, the Zapretny etage was no longer a place of hiding. It was the place where I finally learned how to breathe. The studio was no longer a cold vault of unfinished ideas. It had become the epicenter of a new world. As we stood there, forehead to forehead, the silence of the Octave Estate felt different. It was no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of a museum. It was the expectant, vibrant silence of a blank canvas, waiting for the first stroke of color. Mira's hand remained on my jaw, her thumb moving in slow, rhythmic circles that seemed to rewrite the very texture of my skin. I, the girl who had lived for 23 years in the muted tones of nocturnal indifference, was suddenly burning in the high-definition heat of her touch. "The rain is stopping," Mira whispered, her olive-green eyes searching mine with an intensity that made the lavender dawn seem dull. I turned my head slightly, looking toward the great skylight. She was right. The frantic, percussive drumming had slowed to a gentle, rhythmic tap. The heavy, bruised clouds were beginning to tear, revealing slivers of a pale, translucent gold. The world outside was emerging from its watery grave, but the girl inside my arms was the only horizon I cared to witness. "I don't want the sun to come back yet," I confessed, my voice a soft tremor in the cooling air. "The sun means the world comes back. It means the phones start ringing, the cars start moving, and the cold CEO and the solar athlete have to go back to their roles. I'm not ready to be a ghost again, Mira. I'm not ready to lose this frequency." Mira didn't answer with words. Instead, she took my hand, the one still stained with the charcoal of her likeness, and pressed it against her heart. Through the dusty rose fabric of her sweater, I felt it, a powerful, frantic, beautiful thrum. It was the same rhythm I had heard in the jazz record, the same pulse I had tried to capture in my sketches. "You think this is tied to the weather?" she asked, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Olivia, you're the one who taught me that art isn't about what's happening outside. It's about what stays when the lights go out. I'm not going anywhere. The courts can dry, the season can change, but I've seen the way you look at me when you think I'm a melody. You can't unhear that." She stepped back, just an inch, but kept her fingers laced through mine. She led me away from the canvases and the turpentine, back down the stairs to the heart of the house. We returned to the emerald green sofa, the site of our first shared sanctuary. The fireplace was cold now, filled with gray ash, but the room was flooded with the soft, ethereal light of a post-storm morning. We sat down, and this time, there was no hesitation. I pulled the heavy wool blanket around us both, and Mira curled into my side as if she'd been designed to fit there. I rested my chin on the top of her wheat blonde head, breathing in the scent of rain and citrus. My long, ink-black hair spilled over us like a protective veil, a dark river meeting a golden shore. "What happens now?" I asked, looking at the dust motes dancing in a stray beam of sunlight. "Now," Mira said, her voice drifting into the peaceful haze of exhaustion. "We stop trying to be opposites. We stop the cold and the warm. We just exist. You paint, I play, and in the evenings, we find a new record. No more forbidden floors. The whole house is ours now." She reached for the record player one last time, her honey-tanned hand steady and sure. She didn't choose a frantic pop song or a loud anthem. She found a slow, melodic piano piece. Something soft, romantic, and tinged with the sweetness of a long-awaited resolution. As the music began to drift through the mahogany halls, the last of my defensive walls crumbled into dust. The sweet revenge was complete. I had spent my life punishing myself with solitude, and she had spent hers punishing herself with noise. Together, we had found the middle ground, a soft, romantic resonance that didn't require a crowd or a trophy. It only required the courage to be seen. As the sun finally broke through the clouds, bathing the room in a brilliant, triumphant gold, I felt Mira's breathing grow deep and regular against my chest. She was asleep, safe in the silence we had built together. I looked at our joined hands, the moonstone and the honey, and I realized that the zapretny etage was a memory. I didn't close my eyes. I watched the light move across the floor, tracing the path of the rain on the window. I wasn't a ghost, and I wasn't a shadow. I was Olivia, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just observing the world, I was living in it. The resonance of autumn wasn't the sound of the wind or the rain. It was the sound of a heart, finally finding its twin. And as I drifted off to sleep, next to the girl who had brought the sun into my attic, I knew that even when winter came, the heat between us would be enough to keep the shadows at bay. The silence was finally, beautifully, ours.